What's up? Joshua 1620 here in Spencer, Mass. Jake from Barnstorm Cycles. Let's just jump into it, man. Talk to us a little bit about your background, like how you got into motorcycles. Maybe let's start with just what Barnstorm is and kind of what you do here in Mass.
Yeah, so Barnstorm Cycles, my company. I've been doing this full time for about 20 years now. Founded the company in 2011. No, sorry. 2004. 2004. Okay. November 2004.
Where was the original location? Where did it start?
Originally in Worcester. I was in an old barn. That was my childhood home. It actually, technically an old carriage house, but we always called it the barn. Yeah. So it was like a garage, 1,600 square feet of garage on the first floor, and then we lived above it. Super cool old building.
And you were always into motorcycles, or why motorcycles? How did it get?
So my dad always had bikes. He had bikes since he was like 16, 17. So when I, was born, there was just bikes in my life. Yeah. The first time I ever rode on a motorcycle was when my mom was pregnant with me.
Oh shit!
And there's pictures of me, sitting on the tank, in front of my dad when I was definitely too young. You'd probably get arrested doing that stuff nowadays. But so I was always around bikes, Harleys at the time, FXR specifically. And my dad, we were kind of like a do-it-yourself type mentality in our household. So he was always tinkering, taking stuff apart, fixing things himself. It was a pretty hands-on family. So I just grew up in that environment and started riding dirt bikes when I was big enough. I had my first mini bike when I was like 4.
Oh shit.
So I just liked it. Just kind of got the bug.
When was your first motorcycle? How old were you?
First real motorcycle on the road?
Yeah.
So when I was 10, my mom, of all people, bought me a Honda Aero 125 scooter, and I rode that in a parking lot until I was 16, and then I registered and insured it. And so that was the first motorcycle I rode by myself on the road.
Yeah.
And then the next summer, I worked my ass off working for my dad, landscaping, different. He has a real estate management company, so I worked for them, and I bought a Harley Davidson Sportster.
Very cool. So you're at the original location, working on your own bike, kind of figuring out, thinking it's something you want to do. Who's one of your, how does it start? One of your first customers kind of come in, or someone's like, hey, I need some help with a bike? How do you kind of, the first transactional moment where you worked on someone's motorcycle for cash?
Ever?
Yeah.
Well.
Or best of your recollection.
So originally when we started the company, it was a school project. It wasn't meant to be a real company.
Interesting.
It was just because at the time the college I was going to didn't have any business courses.
Okay.
So I designed my own and got permission from the college to do it as during the winter fieldwork period. So I put together a business plan, budget, goals, this and that, and got it approved by the school. And they had never had anyone do that before, so that was a whole thing. So we started the company, and the original business model was to build a custom bike and then try and sell it. Right. And then build another one and try and sell it. So that was the original business model. And when we got into that, we were working on a few different bikes. My dad and I, we were partners. And I wasn't going to do service. But I started having people come in and ask if I could do oil change,
right,
change a tire, whatever it is. Because I had a couple lifts and I had, but I was still pretty green, aside from growing up in that environment. And when I was mid-teens, I apprenticed with a family friend at a bike shop. So I had some experience.
Okay.
But I just had people coming in, and at the time, they were willing to pay me $50-$60 an hour as a 19, 20-year-old kid to do work on their bikes. And truth be told, I would have worked on them for free back then because I just liked working on bikes. So I started incorporating service in. So I don't remember who my actual first paying customer was.
Yeah, during that time in your life is when it...
But yeah, it was the business had already kind of started, but it was a school project. It was kind of a weird thing. I didn't know if it was any longevity to it. And then I started getting service customers, and I was enjoying it, and I was making some money, and I was doing what I love, working with bikes every day, and to the point where, not every day. It was very part-time at the time because I was still in school, and eventually I dropped out of school.
I was going to say, when does the point hit where you're like, listen, this is what I want to do, and I want to take a run on this, I want to get out of school? There's a one moment where you just kind of realized it, or you started to there was more opportunity to work on bikes, and you're not sitting in a classroom wanting to work on motorcycles. When did that hit? What year of school when you decided to bump up?
So I got through 3 years full-time in college where I went to school in Vermont, so I was back and forth every weekend And there was actually a point where I was coming back midweek, 1 day a week, to do stuff. At the time, I was also working part-time at a machine shop. So I was just like, my schedule, I don't know how I honestly did everything. I was a madman at that time.
Yeah, for sure.
I was younger, way more energy. But yeah, I completed 3 full years of school, and then I was like, I'm not going back. I tried doing some night school after that because I was like, I should just finish and get my degree. Yeah. But it was. I think the term my dad used was, you got to decide if you're pregnant or not. Like, you're going to do it or you're not going to do it.
That's what my next question is. I think a lot of young guys are kind of faced with it. The opportunity to do some work in the trades or do some work around skill or do something as amazing as, custom motorcycle work. And then the other side of it and kind of stepping off that ledge and making that choice. Did you get a lot of advice from people, or did your dad sounds like a pretty badass guy, some individual kind of, you make your own decision, you're a man to make your own decision. Like, did you talk to people about it? Like, how do you kind of formulate the decision to be like, I'm going to step off the ledge here, leave, 3 years into school, go out on my own and really kind of try to do this? Like, just talk a little bit about that process and how you kind of really came to that decision. 'Cause I think a lot of guys that'll watch this, they might have a garage and they love doing stuff and they're doing other things to pay the bills, but they'd rather be doing this. And at that time, it is a leap of faith, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't have a great answer. I feel like I'm still figuring it out every day. Obviously I have goals, aspirations, plans, but the business model has changed several times throughout the past 20 years, and it may change again. Some of that is being willing to adapt. I think it was Ernest Shackleton said that the key to survival is being adaptable. Yeah. That's a paraphrase. That's not an exact quote, but
pretty damn close. The Shackleton quote's pretty solid.
So I think I was never 100% sure. I think it'd be impossible to be 100% sure on anything. Right. But I was like, I knew it was what I wanted to do, and I had good support. My dad was very supportive. My family was very supportive. At the time, I didn't have a lot of responsibility. I was young. Yeah. And so I was like, I'll just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? I fail, or it doesn't work, or, whatever. So I went for it, and we managed to, make it work for until, still here. Obviously, like I said, mid-pandemic, we kind of made some major changes. But I'm still here, and I'm still working on motorcycles. So.
Talk to me a little about how it's changed. You touched on this a couple different times. Super curious around some of the bigger builds you've done. I know you've done some celebrity builds. Mm-hmm. You've done some big time builds for kind of local guys. I know it's still part of the business. We've talked about that a little bit. Just in terms of how the business has changed, the focus is a lot on custom parts you're talking about right now, mm-hmm. and some intuitive stuff that, where you can modify stuff. Guys love to trick their bikes up. My dad, my brother are always tricking their stuff up. But just, talk about what your focus is right now for the business in the next 12, 24 months, what you're kind of focusing on and where you're seeing, some of the opportunity in motorcycle.
Yeah. So, kind of like the triumph behind us, I feel like the business is kind of coming full circle to where my initial aspirations lay. The original business model was custom work only. Yep. And I kind of got into the weeds with service, selling bikes, that kind of thing. I mean, at one point we had almost 100 motorcycles for sale here. Wow. Full team of people.
Were they just all out everywhere, just full?
Mostly upstairs.
No shit.
We could fit about 75 bikes upstairs if we really crammed them in.
Is there a freight elevator in here? I didn't even know that.
I have a fork truck, and I custom built some pallets to move stuff up and down.
Sick ass.
And so, we got kind of not into the weeds on that stuff per se, but that was really the focus of the business. We were doing events, 3 to 4 events a year. And so I found myself doing less and less of the things that I really wanted to do, and more of, managing the team and making sure events were going and, this and that. And it was just not, it was enjoyable, and it was, it was work, but it wasn't really I wasn't really working with my hands as much as I wanted to.
Kind of why you started in the first place.
Yeah. So, like I said, during the pandemic, we really struggled with staffing and those kinds of things, and the bike sale, the market went kind of crazy. So it was a tough decision to make a major pivot, but I decided to just kind of go back to what I like to do, focus on custom projects, custom fab, welding, specialty work like that, and try to grow what had kind of started on accident is this parts line thing, with the Challenger parts we had made, and try and see if I could make that a larger aspect of the business, and kind of allow me to focus back in on the niche that I'm really interested in, which is the custom projects and building bikes for people and doing that stuff.
Super unique in motorcycle culture, where like big, large companies, established companies do rely on like riders to kind of come up with innovation, and guys like yourself and fabricators. And there's a world where like there's that much aftermarket stuff. I know it exists like in auto and other places. It exists a lot in like firearms and custom stuff for sight. But it is one of the cooler parts of like motorcycle culture, is that there's independent fab and creative guys that are making rad aftermarket parts, and you can. There's a lot of rad stuff out there. Like, how do you differentiate yourself out there? Because it is kind of a competitive space, right? Is it kind of focusing on, is it just like this would be better known from riding the bike, personal experience, or just hearing feedback from guys? Just talk about, like, you said it kind of started on accident, but at the same time, it's just wild that exists, right? I mean, you can like kind of come with aftermarket stuff, and if it's a bike that's super popular, guys are riding and they want better stuff out of the factory. And how do you work with big manufacturers in terms of like keeping those ideas kind of safe and the IP in those ideas safe? Do they not want to mess with it a little bit, or is it just sort of you have to have a good relationship with them?
Yeah, I think a lot of, like anything, it's relationships,
Yep.
At the, retail level and at the manufacturing level, and like, business to business, like people buy from people at the end of the day. So
Right.
I think I've always tried to be as honest and straightforward and reliable as possible with my customers and other companies I deal with, and just be a real human being.
Yeah.
And I find that usually gets me reciprocal treatment.
Yep.
The motorcycling community, while there is obviously, it's a retail space and people are trying to make a living, and there are some big companies in the space and some small guys like myself, it's a pretty small community, like relatively speaking.
Right.
And so I feel like it's pretty respectful. Like anything, you get some jerks here and there, and some people who are just in it to.
But if someone's biting what you did, people will call them out about it, right? It's small enough that there's
Yeah.
some checks and balances there a little.
I think so, especially in the space that I'm in. I'm like in a niche inside of a niche with the product line that I do. It's very small volume stuff at the moment, and so yeah, I mean, most of my stuff's pretty unique. And if someone were to really rip me off, I don't know how well it would go over for them.
Right.
I mean. It hasn't happened yet, knock on wood, thankfully. And it's the kind of thing where, like, even myself as designing product, I try to make sure I'm aware of what else is out there to the best of my ability, so I'm not blatantly copying anyone.
Yeah.
Fortunately, like I said, most of the stuff, with the exception of my handlebar risers, pretty much all my parts are very unique at the moment.
Yeah.
So there's not really anything else out there like them anyway. So.
Not to do any shout outs or anything or any call outs, but like just talk to us about like some of the crazier builds. I know you've done some builds for some pretty high profile guys and worked on some stuff for pretty high profile riders.
Yeah.
Any ones that stand out you want to chat a little bit about, or some of your favorite ones, or some of the funnier ones, or some of the more interesting ones?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to do a lot of cool stuff for a kid who started off working in his home garage. Motorcycling is brought me all around the country, and some of my work's been gone out. The bike I built for Indian last year went to Japan, which was cool. I didn't get to go, but the bike was there, so that was cool.
Wow.
I got to work on a really cool project with Carrie a few years ago, the King Killer bike that we did.
I remember that bike.
And that was awesome too, because it was a really cool, like, core group of guys that were there. It was me, Evan Favaro, Sacha from Kraus, Big B, Carrie, and so like it was just like a little hive mind of super creative, super talented people.
Yeah.
Randomly, I built a few bikes for Tiffany's, the jewelry company.
That's wild. What did they do with them?
It was part of this like 12 days of Christmas thing they were doing a couple years ago.
Yeah.
And to be completely honest, like, I get, like everyone, I get a lot of junk email.
For sure.
And the email was in my spam folder, and I periodically go through the spam. And I thought it was spam, but I was like, maybe it's not. So I replied. Like, there was a 50-50 shot of me even
For
replying.
Sure. Yeah.
Turns out it was 100% real. And we built a couple bikes for him. And then I ended up building a bike for the CFO of the company at the time, like a personal one based on the two we had done.
Awesome. CFO Tiffany's a rider. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Pretty
So
cool.
that was actually really cool. Like, I got to go to Tiffany's a couple times, like got a private tour of this, like the space after hours. They're a big company, and they're like it was weird to it was like a whole different dynamic from working on like a regular customer one-on-one to like this. There was like committees and meetings and lawyers involved, and it was like a whole thing. Yeah. But it was cool. That was a cool experience. Built a couple bikes for some local Indian dealers. Great experience with Moms of Manchester up in Manchester, New Hampshire. Super awesome dealership there. We did a really cool Challenger with them. So yeah, I've gotten to do some really cool stuff, go some cool places. Like I said, I had a bike in the Michael Lichter show in Sturgis. So yeah, way more. I've done way more and met more people than I ever imagined. Just cool. Working on motorcycles.
Awesome.
And a lot of it's just been dumb luck, being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And like I said, trying to be a genuine human being and just kind of be myself and.
For sure. Advice for young guys. You get a young guy who's really into motorcycles. He's working on his motorcycle himself. He's tricking out a little bit, but he wants to do it for a living. He wants to, he wants to be around bikes. He wants to work on them. Like, right now, a young guy coming up. Like, what's a path he could take? Is it go try to get a job at a dealership? Try to go to a Volk school? Like, if you were in 2024 and you were a young guy kind of trying to do it with what you see in the industry, just some takeaways from some guys who might be watching it.
Tough. I mean, I would say it's not a get-rich-quick scheme.
Right.
There are definitely many other careers you could get into without formal education and do much better financially. So you need to decide like what your goals are. Like there are some trade-offs. Yep. Like I said, I've gotten to do a lot of cool stuff and meet a lot of cool people and have a lot of fun, but I have struggled at times financially to make it make sense.
Right.
Significantly so. But it's more like I've been doing motorcycles my whole life. It's like what I know, right? So, and I also have like a weird non-traditional entry into doing this. I grew up doing it as a hobby with my father. I apprenticed at a motorcycle shop when I was like 16, 17. So I got exposure to it. And then like for my like welding and fabrication background, I actually did some like free apprenticeship type work at a machine shop, and I worked for very short money at a welding shop for a couple of years when the business was like in its fledgling state. So I got experience and knowledge with some really, really good mentors, Vanji Tool Company, and I worked for a gentleman there named Paul Ottaviano and Danny Bermer at Advanced Welding and Fabricating in Millbury. Guys who like gave me a chance, like they gave me a shot. I had no real skills to speak of, but they saw that I was willing to learn and willing to do whatever. I sweep floors, clean toilets. Like, fortunately, they didn't really make me do that stuff, but I would have.
You would have done it, yeah.
And I worked for free at Vanji as like an apprenticeship type position for 7 weeks, where I just did whatever they wanted me to do. But he gave me access to the lathe and the welder, and he gave me a chance to learn some stuff.
Right.
And then I was able to kind of roll that knowledge into bikes. So I don't necessarily have experience with like motorcycle school or MMI or trade school or any of those things.
Right.
So I think those are good routes for people for sure.
Yep.
A little bit more defined and a little bit more predictable.
Yeah, structure.
Thank you. My whole life is not like, my life's been very like that. Yeah. Non-traditional for sure. But I think if motorcycles or hot rods or whatever is like, you really have a burning desire inside of you to create that stuff, I would encourage you to try and find a way to make it work, but just know like it will come with sacrifices. Right. You will be making sacrifices. For sure.
How do folks find you? If you want to give a shout out, like website, Instagram, just, if someone's getting in touch with you, they want to build a bike, they want to just learn a little bit more, like what's the best way to find Barnstorm?
Online, I would say. My website's barnstormcycles.com, and my Instagram is Barnstorm Cycles, and my Facebook is Barnstorm Cycles.
And your shop is here. Where are we located?
We're in Spencer, Massachusetts. Really cool old little like mill town. There used to be a big shoe factory was like the thing that they did here in Spencer, and wire. And so we're 24 Wall Street, Spencer is the shop.
Cool.
That's
Kick-ass. Appreciate you giving us a look around, just all kinds of rad stuff, and awesome. Give us some time today, open the doors.
Yeah, no.
You're a cool story, Jake.
Appreciate you coming out.
Yeah, you do some amazing work.